A statement by the Women's Advocacy for Equality Network. On the occasion of August 15, 5 years since the Taliban's return to the power in Afghanistan. August 15, 2021 was not merely the day that the government of Afghanistan collapsed and political power changed hands. It marked the beginning of a period in which the fundamental rights and freedoms of millions of Afghans, particularly women and girls, have been systematically, extensively, and deliberately restricted and denied. Over the past 5 years, the Taliban have progressively imposed decreased regulations and restrictive policies that have gradually excluded women from all spheres of social, economic, and political life, including through the denial of access to secondary and higher education, prohibitions on employment, severe restrictions on freedom of movement, and the denial of women's ability to participate freely in public life. In addition to the mechanism used to enforce these restrictions, the Taliban have exerted pressures on families, creating conditions conducive to the control, coercion, and even punishment of women within the family sphere. At the same time, civil society, media outlets, human rights defenders, and critical voices have faced threats, pressure, arbitrary detention, and systematic repressions. We, the members of the Women's Advocacy for Equality Network, emphasize that a relative reduction in armed violence does not in any way constitute peace. Peace in which half of the society is deprived of fundamental human and civic rights. Freedom of expression and the right to protest are restricted. Ethnic and religious minorities face discrimination and insecurity, and victims are denied access to justice, is neither just nor sustainable. The policies and decrees imposed by the Taliban against women and girls are not isolated or temporary measures. Rather, they form part of a systematic and deliberate structure aimed at excluding women from education, employment, social participation, and public and political decision-making, as well as exercising comprehensive control over multiple aspects of their lives. We call upon the United Nations, international organizations, governments, and human rights bodies to: first, end gender apartheid and the systematic exclusion of women and girls. Take immediate and sustained action to end gender apartheid and restore women's rights to education, employment, freedom of movement, freedom of expression, and equal participation in public life. Second, ensure accountability for serious human rights violations. Strengthen independent international mechanisms to document, preserve evidence of, and investigate serious human rights violations, including gender-based persecution, and ensure accountability for those responsible. Third, demand the immediate release of persons arbitrarily detained and address forced disappearances. Demand the immediate and unconditional release of persons arbitrarily detained for peaceful protests, journalism, civil society activists, human rights advocacy, or exercising their fundamental rights, and establish the fate of persons subjected to enforced disappearance. Fourth, reject normalization and legitimization in the absence of meaningful human rights progress. Refrain from political or diplomatic normalization or legitimization of the Taliban without clear, genuine, and measurable progress in human and women's rights. Fifth, strengthen protection and international pathways for those at risk. Strengthen protection measures, education opportunities, safe humanitarian pathways, and effective asylum, and international protection mechanisms for women, girls, journalists, human rights defenders, civil society activists, and members of vulnerable and at-risk communities. 6. Ensure international accountability for widespread and systematic human rights violations. Hold the Taliban accountable through appropriate international judicial and accountability mechanisms for widespread and systematic human rights violations, including the persecution of women and girls, targeted killings, enforced disappearances, forced displacement, land dispossessions and discriminations, and persecution against ethnic, linguistic, and religious minorities, particularly Hazaras. We will not remain silent in the face of the normalization of injustice for the forgetting of Afghanistan. We stand with women and girls, the families of victims, journalists, human rights defenders, civil society activists, and all citizens who continue to struggle for freedom, equality, justice, and human dignity. We will continue our advocacy, documentations, politic awarenesses, and support for victims, and will work to build a coordinated, sustained, and international advocacy movement. 5 years after the Taliban's return to the power, our message remains clear and unequivocal. Afghanistan cannot achieve lasting peace without women, a vibrant civil society, justice, and equal rights. Afghan women cannot be erased. The voice of victims must not be silenced, and no political expediency should take precedence over justice and human dignity. Women's Advocacy for Equality Network, August 14, 2026.